Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special episode. We are talking Highlander with a true, honest Scotsman, Scott Murphy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be on.
The minute I heard there was an actual Scotsman on the network, I was like, I have to do Highlander with him. Fortunately, you agreed. Thank you so much.
That's no problem.
Yeah, this movie's going to make me turn into a big nerd. I just love Highlander. I can't help it. I've loved this movie since I was a kid.
Yeah. No, I've loved this movie since I was a kid as well. I guess so. I mean, obviously, I don't remember it coming out because I was born in 1985, so that wouldn't make any
I don't
sense.
remember it coming out either because it bombed. It bombed so hard, it hit the ground, and that's the only reason we knew there was a movie coming out, because we could hear like that hard, loud thud. Like Highlander did nothing. It cost 16 million, and I think it did like worldwide 5 million or something. So they didn't even get their money back. It was a unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. It's kind of one of those weird things where the budget level is kind of varies depending on the article you've read. Like, because I saw an interview with Russell McKay from the time, and he said like 12 million, and then some others have seen 13 million, and I've seen 16 million. So like, it's very confusing.
Yeah, I'm sure Russell had 12 to spend, and the rest just got stuck somewhere. From the point of the studios getting the money to the point of them meeting it out to their underlings, right? I mean, it was 1985. Yeah. Coke wasn't cheap.
That's very true. But no, I came to it like in a kind of circuitous kind of route, because like everything, there was a weird time in the 80s and early 90s where lots of adult franchises had cartoons, and Highlander was like that. Highlander had an animated series, and I saw the animated series. And
did you see the TV show?
The movies. I have also, yes,
the Canadian TV show.
Yes, the TV show was shown in the UK on ITV, and I used to watch that as well. So I have seen the TV show and the animated series and like 4 of the 5 movies.
All I can say about the rest of it is there can be only one. Yes, Highlander is true. Great. It stands on its own. It stands the test of time, because when you watch it, it doesn't matter how dated the special effects are. You just get glued to the screen and you just keep watching. I mean, I watched it yesterday, and it was like, full disclosure, when you start doing podcasts and you start watching movies for a podcast, you're actually looking at it like it's the first time again, because it's this whole new perspective, right? That's part of the fun, really. So I was watching Highlander, and I was like amazed by the choices they made, and just the off the wall way of shooting scenes. It was just a crazy, crazy movie. I'm still amazed by it. I was amazed by it when the first time I saw it, when I just accidentally rented it on video. So I watched it probably 20 times. Like the first time I rented it, I was like, this movie is insane. This movie is crazy. I love it.
It is a great movie. And like you say, you do watch things differently, like when you know that you're going to do a podcast episode. So, and there's just certain things that you wouldn't normally view as like as a movie viewer that you would view as somebody who's kind of thinking like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast about this.
Yeah, and there you have it. You start off right away. This is all Russell McKay. Have you seen his original first feature, Razorback?
I have not,
because you're a horror guy.
I know I am a horror guy. It's been on my watch list for a while, and I will definitely track it down at some stage, but I've not seen it yet. So it's definitely on the watch list.
You have not seen Razorback? Ironically, that's a movie I actually saw in the theaters.
Wow.
Yeah, peculiar thing. Razorback was big here. I don't know why, but it was big. Maybe because it had something to do with animals or something, which was basically kind of not a spoof, but kind of a take on Jaws. And instead of a shark, it's a big boar, a giant boar out in the outback of Australia, and it hunts and eats people. It's pretty much the same plot, but it's good. It's fun. And it's fun because it does have one thing going for it, and that's Russell Mulcahy. Because before he started filming, he already had that crazy style he had. To give you an example of what those music videos were like, watch Duran Duran's Wild Boys. It's amazing. And it's like a Mad Max movie, a mini Mad Max movie. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really crazy. And it's funny as well because like Razorback, obviously Razorback didn't become like a big success, but it has become like a kind of cult classic. And
Mm-hmm.
much like this movie, it was a total failure. And
Mm,
because it kind of came at the end of the kind of Jaws rip-off cycle,
yeah.
because you'd had things like Piranha and
Mm-hmm.
Alligator and Grizzly and all these kind of things. Every variation of when animals attack. And it
Right.
kind of came kind of the very tail end of that. So it
Except
was
for
just like
90s
people.
Anaconda. That was a different story.
Oh yes, that was the kind of revival, like the Anaconda, Lake Placid, like that kind of late 90s. That was the kind of revival of like the when animals attack
They
horror
were brutal.
subgenre.
They were just brutal. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, well, Russell McKay is a weird guy, and you can tell from the movie. He has kind of, well, he's a little on the dark side, I think. And you can also tell that from the movie because he makes interesting choices. So we'll get into that. So yes, no success for Highlander except for on video because nerds like me found it. They found that movie and they watched it and rented it and re-rented it and ultimately bought it. And so it became a big enough success that it spawned cartoons and awful sequels and TV shows. And I hear Henry Cavill has been cast as Highlander now, and they're going to do a reimagining reboots. I don't know. I suspect with modern sensibilities, it will mean that Brenda is the actual winner of the prize. But we're getting a new one. So I guess we should talk about the original. So it's 1985, and a man called Russell Nash is suspected of decapitating another man. His flashback, however, reveals he's truly a Scottish clansman called Connor MacLeod, who is killed on a 16th century battlefield but somehow survives. So obviously he's driven from his village for witchcraft, and he's taught by a Spanish knight who is actually Egyptian and much older that he's immortal and can only be killed by other immortals like himself and only through decapitation. His head must be severed. He must now bide his time until the gathering. That's apparently when all those head cutters, all those guys come together and fight with swords. Why they don't fight with guns and then swords like they did in the TV shows? A mystery, but however, that's how it works.
They didn't think of it at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, it didn't come up in a meeting. So he's biding his time, and when the remaining few fight for the prize, they basically become Jesus or Lucifer. That's really what it boils down to. It's good versus evil. And Connor, we quickly learn, is the good guy, and there's another evil guy called Victor Kruger, who in the past is known as the Kurgan. And he's Russian, so that really helps us narrow down that he's actually a bad guy, because Russian people are bad, right?
They are in every movie in the 1980s.
Yes. And they will be again, of course.
Like
Yes.
probably now in the next decade, they'll probably go through a second Russian villain phase in Hollywood, I'm sure.
So how old were you when you first saw it?
Oh, was right.
Were you the
I'm
right
trying to
age?
think. I think I was the right age. Yeah, because I think that the cartoon came out when I was about 9 or something, and then I saw it
Right.
like a few years later. So I probably saw it when I was about 12.
Oh, 12
I
is
would
perfect.
estimate. Yeah, so
12 is
perfect age.
perfect for watching decapitations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
And watching
definitely.
quickenings.
Yes, I think it is kind of the perfect age, like because it kind of pushes all the buttons for like a 12-year-old kid.
Oh, yeah.
Like
So
yeah.
do you think the quickening an allegory for an orgasm?
I hadn't really thought about it like that. That's yeah.
Because they do seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I guess that they do seem quite ecstatic about it. So like it does seem like you get like I don't know. It's like maybe they get like more immortal in some way. It's like getting a
Mm-hmm.
power up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, I've taken your immortality away. Ha 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 ha.
And that's one of those things you sort of have to wonder because they did not explain this in the movie. I mean, they don't like over explain the plot or anything or over explain any of the concepts. So this quickening thing could mean anything. So do they get all their memories past?
Yeah,
And
you do
do
wonder.
they
Like,
get like the power of all the other immortals that immortal killed? Is it the power up like that?
yeah, maybe. Like I don't know. Like because, like you say, they don't explain. So it could be
Nope.
that they that they get kind of more badass as time goes on. The more they decapitate other immortals, they kind of maybe absorb all their fighting, battling skills, and then like so they've got their own skills plus the skills of the person they've just decapitated. So now they're even more powerful, and they get just progressively more and more powerful as they decapitate more and more other immortals.
Right. Yeah. Because that was one of the things that was like, okay, my nerd sense is like tingling now. When I watched it yesterday, I was like, okay, so what is actually a quickening? Because to a 12-year-old, it's like, oh, he's having an orgasm. I've had that yesterday, you know? It's like, I know what that is. I haven't decapitated anyone for it, but I sort of recognize what's happening here. Windows are bursting and things are flying around the room. And yeah, but the adult in me who's trying to make sense of immortality and super immortals killing each other to gain more power or cut down on the numbers, so the gathering will be a little less busy. So
yeah,
because that's another thing. They were supposed to wait for the gathering, right?
They were like I guess that they're supposed to. They get some like kind of they get like a kind of tingling spidey sense that the gathering is coming. That's my feeling that that must be happening. But yes, the movie doesn't really explain anything because they don't explain how they become immortal either. There is a suggestion that they are basically in this movie before the sequels kind of muck about with
forget
it.
About the sequels.
There's a suggestion in this film that they are essentially human and their immortality is like kind of ignited, kind of started up by their first death. So they die and then they come back as an immortal, because like that's how that works, kind of maybe. It feels like that might be kind of how it works, but again, I'm just kind of reading into things, extrapolating. I'm not like it's not explained in the film.
So, and the other immortals know when another immortal is about to die or coming of age or whatever you would call it, because the Kurgan knows that the MacLeod is immortal, because that's why he enters the battle on the side of the Frasers.
Exactly. So
everybody has to leave Connor alone.
Yes. So there seems to be a Spidey sense thing where like,
or a Jedi mind trick or something.
Immortals are like, oh, a new immortal is going to be created today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you sort of have to take that as a given. They have some kind of sixth sense that tells them, well, there's another immortal nearby, and there's also another immortal becoming an immortal. And so then you have the Kurgan, who everybody is deathly afraid of because he's all powerful and, well, it's going to suck if he wins the prize. And he's probably, no fun at parties, right? When you're at one of the immortal parties, and there are immortal parties, apparently, they all know each other and they hang out. And so when he's at the party, then someone gets drunk and maybe a little bit too drunk, and then he just probably, cuts their head off and laughs, something like that, and just walks around with the head saying, ha, 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 he's one of those guys. So he's not invited to the parties anymore.
Guys. No, the at the immortal annual general meeting, he's not there.
Yes. Right. Well, it does make sense, when you're immortal and you're amongst other immortals, at least they get your problems.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. If they're at the immortal Christmas
my wife
party.
is complaining we don't have kids yet, or worse, my wife just had a baby. Because the immortals, of course, are infertile, which is a good contrivance.
It is a very good contrivance.
Because otherwise they would have thousands of kids.
Yeah, and there would just be way too many. It just becomes way too complicated for the gathering and the whole kind of situation. There would just be way too many immortals to get through. Of like, this film would be set in like the year 3000 if it was, there was that many immortals, and we're getting to the end game, like that. Yeah.
Yes, and you would have like father against grandson. Your grandchildren would be trying to kill you once they learn they're immortal. It's like, I'll start with grandpa. It just, it cuts down on a lot of nonsense.
Yeah.
So here we have Connor MacLeod. Connor MacLeod is a Scotsman, but he doesn't sound Scottish, does he?
No. And that's because he is played by Christopher Lambert, who at the time couldn't speak English fluently.
No.
So
needed a language coach.
Yes, he was needed a language coach. He was kind of reading the script out pretty much phonetically. So
Mm-hmm. And I think that's how it works, because I suspect the language coach didn't speak French. So he would just read out the script and they would just sort of correct him with the sounds. I think that because I saw an interview in French with him and Christophe Lambert. And that's what they really call him, not Christopher Lambert, but Christophe Lambert. And he's huge in France. I mean, he's huge.
Yes,
he's one of their, played with everybody, right? Catherine Deneuve, everybody. So he's a big deal. Mm-hmm. So apparently they had the premiere in France and the movie was a success in France. What money they made in France because Christopher was in it, right? When you see the interview, you see another thing that's really interesting that also shows up in the movie, and that he needs really thick glasses. And in the movie, he doesn't wear contacts. So in the movie, he just sort of looks blind. You see him squinting his eyes, and it's like half the time he doesn't see what he's doing. So it's a minor miracle that movie even happened, because there's a lot of running and there's a lot of fighting, and they had to really practice the choreography because he would have hurt people.
Yeah, I have read that because Christopher Lambert is starred in a number of action movies, that he has injured himself a number of times on a number of movies because he generally doesn't wear glasses in his films, but he is very, very, very short-sighted and needs very thick glasses, and so can see very little. I mean, hats off to him for all the mad risks he has taken over the course of his career.
Doing everything by touch.
Yeah, pretty much.
So the movie was written by a guy called Gregory Wyden. He's on the special edition DVD. In fact, he's all over it. So Gregory Wyden was a film student, and he wrote the script after a trip to London, started cranking his gears. It's like, hey, what if? So he wrote the script as a kind of a class thing. You have to write a script and they talk about it. And so his teacher at some point said, hey, this is halfway decent. You should probably do something with this. And that was during the weird time when if you had a decent script, you could just get an agent and it would be read. And at some point, if you were lucky, it would get shot because everybody was on coke. Everybody needed a movie yesterday. And whatever they read, they thought was awesome. It was coke-infused Hollywood. We got the 80s because the Colombians got their act together and had a nice little distribution ring going to particularly California. It became Crazy Town. We got really cool movies because everybody was drug addicted. Think about that one.
Yeah, people just took mad punts on just mad ideas. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like I remember seeing an interview with him, Gregory Wyden, talking about how he sold the script. Yeah, it's just that kind of weird time in the early 80s where you could do that. He sold the script in 1982, ended up getting made and released in 1986. You know,
yeah,
so that was just a kind of strange, heady times. And I also saw in an interview he was heavily influenced by The Duelist and
right,
kind of plot
Ridley
of that
Scott's movie. Yes,
yeah, the Ridley Scott film.
Right.
And, yeah.
That, and there's another element. Apparently, Gregory was a firefighter, and he wrote his entire script waiting for fires to happen in the firehouse. You know how you just sit around that place waiting for the bell to ring, right? So he would just, and so there's this like intense, morose loneliness drifted back into the script after they started rewriting it with other writers. They just kept that loneliness in, this kind of sense of forlorn. Oh, I can't die. I can't have children. The loves of my life all die on me. You know, how am I I'm going to get through life. How am I ever going to get to the gathering? It's like this chronic depression that Russell Nash, Connor McLeod goes through. Gregory Wyden said, yeah, it was like being depressed with a fire axe in your hand. So that became Highlander. I thought that was a good analogy.
That is a good analogy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he used his firefighting experience to write Backdraft.
Yes, he wrote Backdraft. In fact, he wrote a lot of stuff that was really good. Became a good writer. Good for him. Lucky us that, they picked up his script. Of course, the script went through changes. I suspect they cut out most of the exposition in terms of how that universe actually functioned, because we just left to guess.
I'm not sure from interviews I've seen with Gregory Wyden, I'm not sure that there was much in terms of exposition of of like what's happening. Like in terms of, I think he had certain rules in his head, but I'm not sure that there was a lot of that in the script because I've seen a few interviews with him, and it seems like the other writers that are credited, Peter Wellwood and Larry Ferguson, the main change that they made was one of tone. They injected a lot more humor into the script.
It's more of a comedy.
It's more comical.
Yeah.
And they made the Kurgan more of like a kind of boogeyman Freddy Krueger type character who's kind of quippy, rather than the Kurgan's like apparently really quite a serious kind of like the fight is all he's got left in his life, and you know, much more doom and gloom, much more broody villain in Gregory Whitten's original script. I think that was the major changes that they made.
It would have been serious as a heart attack.
I don't know if it would have been that serious, but it definitely would have been a lot more serious than the movie we got.
Well, you lose your head.
I don't know if that would work, but yeah.
Yeah. So a big part of this movie was the soundtrack. And that's one of the big parts why I love this movie so much, because I love Queen and I love Michael Kamen. I think they're awesome. And Queen was only supposed to write one song. You know how rock bands are hired to write like the end credit song or something like that.
Sure.
But because Russell McKay is a music video director and he probably knew them beforehand a little bit, he was just into Queen. And probably in a way that normal movie directors aren't that much into musicians. Russell McKay, he worshipped Queen, kind of like I worship Queen. So you can tell, because there are so many Queen songs in this movie, it's almost like a Queen soundtrack.
Pretty much, like the backbone of their a Kind of Magic album pretty much is songs from Highlander. A Kind of Magic pretty much is the soundtrack to Highlander. It's not like an official soundtrack in the way that they did the official soundtrack for you know, Flash Gordon, but it's almost there. You know, it's like there's so many songs from that album within the movie.
Yeah, and that was around the time that Queen kind of changed the way they started writing music. Before that, it was all Freddie. And after that, because they all got hits from Highlander, the band became much more balanced, because every musician in the band would get their songs written and heard in terms of, well, hey, I made a hit with this. I know what I'm doing. I don't know. I just love those songs. I love Princess of the Universe, and I love Don't Lose Your Head, and they're just amazing. It's like that's kind of like the soundtrack of my childhood, really. Yeah. So around that time, I actually saw them live, which was the tour they did based on this album, which was the Magic Tour, and it was huge. That was the last big tour they did, because Freddie became too ill after that. I remember I was in Rotterdam, and it was the Kuip. That's the big venue they had before the Amsterdam Arena, and it was just filled to the rafters. It was around the time they had Live Aid, when Queen stole the show at Live Aid.
Yeah, because that.
I used to probably see footage.
I've seen footage.
Before you were born?
Yeah, it would have been probably slightly before I was born. I think that was earlier in 1985. I was September 1985. I think it was maybe in the summer or something. So yeah, it would have been slightly before I was born. But yes, I have seen footage of Live Aid, and I've seen footage of that performance. And
because they were working on those songs during the time of Live Aid, and they toured in a big way after Live Aid because of that audience reaction. Because they just had Wembley in the palm of their hands. I can recommend anyone going on YouTube and just watching the Queen set. That's true audience interaction. Freddie would just sing a note and the audience would just repeat it. Like 60, 70,000 people would just repeat it, no matter what he did.
He's one of the all-time greats. He's one of the all-time great rock frontmen. You know, what else can you say?
Yeah, I saw this interview with Freddie, and he talked about, it was with Christopher Lambert. I said it with a smile. They were talking about how rock stars really want to be actors, and actors really want to be rock stars, because they made a music video with Christopher, and they sort of switched places where Christopher Lambert would like lip sync to Freddie stuff, and it was really funny. So, and I think there's a core of truth in that, because there's a lot of actors who want to sing. And there's, for some reason, a lot of singers who always end up in movies. As soon as they have like a hit record, it's like, oh, they do a movie.
That's true. I mean, like it's very common. You know, there's lots of actors who have rubbish bands, even actors I like, you know, like Keanu Reeves and Johnny Depp and
Johnny Depp.
and Russell Crowe and Bruce Willis, you know, like
Russell Crowe, Bruce Willis, you named them.
You know, it's just terrible bands. But
I have seen Bruce Willis live. I have seen him live. And his one album is actually halfway decent.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's worth listening to. He's not awful. He's just sort of, well, okay. he's kind of That's about it. And live, he's absolutely horrible.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, this was the opening of Planet Hollywood. This was the Amsterdam Planet Hollywood at the time. They had Golden Earring. Bruce, of course, was a fanboy of Golden Earring, so they played with him. And they were like, well, you know, we really like your movies. That's about all they said about him.
Of course.
I love his movies.
Oh, I'm just imagining Bruce Willis ruining Radar Love now. That's all I'm imagining.
Yes, that happened. That happened.
God almighty.
Yes, that happened. I was witness to that. Yeah, what can you do? So, okay.
Yeah, Highlander.
Highlander. Back to Highlander. Well, we were talking about the music, and when you're talking about the music, you're talking about Highlander, and you're talking about the hit songs that came off Highlander. Who Wants to Live Forever? I mean, it's beautiful, and it's the heart of the movie, really. Because if you take out the tragic romance, I think you take out the rewatchability. You take out the humanity of the movie. Because you care about Connor, because you care about his lost love.
That's true. And like watching that interview with Gregory Whidden, he kind of said the same thing. It's like the kind of tragic thing that kind of draws people in and keeps people rewatching and is what really resonates. And I kind of get that. And it's kind of amazing because obviously this is kind of an 80s movie. It's a bit cheesy. And there's something kind of amazing about that scene. And I think it is to do with the music of Who Wants to Live Forever. Because his kind of lost love, Heather, like the aging makeup on her is terrible. She just looks like a 24-year-old in a grey wig. And it's kind of hilarious. And yet, despite the hilarity of that, the scene still works.
Yeah,
and I really do think it's like I mean it's partly you know Lambert's performance, but it's a lot to do with the music. And it's amazing to me because I was watching this and I was like, oh, this is hilarious, but I was still being moved by it, and I was like, oh, it still works despite
it comes off as a little quirky.
Yeah, it does.
You forgive it because the music is so powerful.
Yeah,
and it's kind of it's presented as a montage. Really, his love affair with Heather is a montage, and you see her aging, and the music tells the story of their romance. You want her to live forever as well, because
absolutely
they're just happy, and that's just like how life should be. But of course, Connor's life isn't like that, and his life after Heather, or even. I mean, you see him drive off, right? You see him ride off. So he's probably going on adventures to chop people's heads off. That's off camera. There's a lot of stuff off camera. And he would come back every few years, you know, to see how Heather was, you know, and like he'd be calling her and like, well, Heather, and it's like this old woman shows up and oh God, it's so cute, tragic, and you kind of imagine what it would be like. It's like, okay, you don't change. But she just shrinks in front of your eyes, and you don't care because every minute counts. There's a tragedy to that. It's almost beautiful.
Yeah, it
chokes me up.
It is.
It chokes me up.
It is. It's yeah. No, it is. It's touching. Yeah. It's a very moving sequence, and their romance is very, very moving. Yeah.
And that's how Russell hooked us. That's how he hooked us. It's like he got us. He got us to root for Connor. Because before that, you know, Russell Nash in New York is kind of an asshole. I mean, at the start of the movie, we're in an arena. We are watching an AWA card in Madison Square Garden in 1985. Nah, no way. Subsequently, I've learned, okay, it's a card in New Jersey. Well, okay, so maybe Greg Gagne had some courage at some point and thought, you know what, I'm going to tour the Northeast. We're talking wrestling now, but an AWA card, because these were the Fabulous Freebirds, and Greg Gagne's son was also in the match, and some other, the Tonga Kid was in it, and one of the Killer Bees was in it, right? So those were all AWA stable guys back then. You had this match, and I was like, I remember watching that, and I was already reading Pro Wrestling Illustrated, so I knew who those guys were from the magazines, and I was like, hey, wait, that's Tonga Kid, that's this guy, that's this guy. And it's like, they're AWA guys. How does it? And it's Madison Square Garden. We all know Madison Square Garden is the WWF show, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's
Makes
true.
No
that's
sense.
true because the AWA was like they ran out of Minnesota,
right? They were Midwestern.
They were
territory.
like a Midwestern territory, and it's kind of weird as well because like I know that a lot of wrestlers kind of wrestled throughout the territories, and that was the whole point of like territory wrestling. But again, for some reason, I always associate the Fabulous Freebirds with their feud with the Von Erichs. So I always think of them as being like world class championship wrestlers. I was confused by that as well. I was like,
yeah, it's like basically the Freebirds were really free in terms of they were fired from the WWF after wrestling there for like 3 days or something because they did something stupid, Michael Hayes. So they were fired. So they were like the only big faction, big tag team that were never really featured in WWF. I mean, even the Road Warriors finally came over. Right? Yeah. Even the Steiners finally came over. Yeah, or Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff. Koloff was never in WWF. At least not in before that, but not after it became the juggernaut monster it became. But okay, so the reason why we're talking about this is because the movie starts with a wrestling match, and the wrestling match is the allegory that brings Connor back to his memories of ancient Scotland, where he's in a battle, where he gets killed, where he becomes immortal. That's the plot point.
Yeah, but the funny thing I learned kind of doing research was that one of the screenwriters, Peter Bellwood, mentioned that the original thing in the script was it was supposed to be a hockey match, but the NHL wouldn't allow them. So then they approached the AWA.
Yeah, they somehow got in bed with Greg Gagne.
Hockey sticks clashing. And then that was supposed to remind them of swords. Yeah, but then they were just like, I don't know, wrestling.
Because there's one dude with a hockey mask on. Because the fans were real. This was a real card. And they had like 10 minutes to shoot. So they shot 10 minutes of the match. And they shot the footage of the crowd. And I assume made these people sign waivers so they could use their image or something. But the guy with the hockey mask went to that card wearing a hockey mask. I think these days they would probably stop him at the door.
Yeah, probably.
But back then, you'd get the drunks and the weirdos and the psychopaths with masks on. So you see Connor McLeod sitting in the crowd, and there's some guy jabbering in his ear about how great wrestling is, and Connor is just not focused on it. He's just sort of in that kind of PTSD zone of his first battle in Scotland. And so we're in Scotland, Scott. Talk about Scotland.
Yes. So we're up in the Highlands, not where I'm from. I'm from Edinburgh. I would have a much different accent if I came from where this film was set. So, yeah.
Where is it set? Because I didn't get it. I've never been able to find that particular...
It's it's filmed in different places, but it's supposed to be set in Glenfinnan, which is a village near Fort William, in the kind of northwest of Scotland.
Wow.
Yeah.
Way out there. So you're almost in Iceland.
Yes. But I think they filmed in different places because I think there was they filmed round there and they filmed at the lock up there, Loch Shiel, which is near Glenfinnan. But I think they filmed a bit in the Isle of Skye as well, which is one of the Western Isles. So not on the mainland.
They make great whiskey.
Yes, that's the main reason to go to the Western Isles is to do whiskey distillery tours. No offense to to the Western Isles.
Oh yeah.
But he's listening from
and I think
Isles.
they filmed some stuff in Wales. They did all the pickup shots because it was just too rainy and hard to film in Scotland.
Yes, I've seen kind of interviews with a cinematographer. It was like, he was talking about the classic Scotland thing of like 4 seasons in one day of just like, oh, we get sun, we get snow, we get rain, we get a bit of wind,
Right.
like,
Yeah, because I did
typical
Braveheart
Scotland.
on my Mel Gibson channel, and
they filmed that in Ireland.
they filmed that in Ireland. Well, they did film parts in Scotland, but it was just too hard to film there. And I suspect the only reason Braveheart got greenlit at all was because of Highlander and because of the way it was shot. Because you can say a lot of things about Highlander, but the stuff they shot is just so intensely beautiful. I mean, the mountains and the lochs, and it's really gorgeous. Anything that isn't matte painting or miniature, because there's some matte paintings here and there, but anything that isn't matte painting is it's just amazing to see. And it would have, the reason this movie wasn't a success is baffling, especially considering the success the video had. But it would have looked so immense on a big screen. It should have worked. Yeah. It was just bad marketing.
Mm-hmm. Russell McKay's like a big part of that. And for some reason, and I think it's because they come from such an immense country. Mm-hmm. Generally, Australian directors are very good at shooting landscapes,
mm-hmm.
And giving landscapes to their maximum awe effect. And that's kind of what Russell McKay did with like. The Highlands of Scotland are incredibly beautiful, mm-hmm. and they are awe-inspiring. But you can film them in such a way that doesn't make them look like wow. But he did. So
it basically Russell McKay just in director's commentary he just says, "Oh yeah, this was so pretty. This was so easy. I just turned the camera on. It was instant production quality." Like with the shots they did with the castle, they shot that in one morning. He's like, "Oh, we had nice weather. I just turned the camera on. We shot it with 2 units, one and done." This was a one and done movie in a lot of ways, because apparently Russell Crowe doesn't like second takes much, because every time something doesn't work, there are 2 scenes that don't work, he said. And the first scene is where Russell Nash visits Brenda's apartment. We're all over the place talking about this movie because we assume everybody's seen it, knows it by heart like us. So we're just all over the place. Why stay with a narrative about a movie 50 years old? So when he first comes to her apartment and he brings her book, basically, because to tell her, well, I know who you are. They had blocked that scene differently and it didn't work. And Russell Nash was actually chagrined, saying, yeah, we had to shoot this again. Like, they lost time on it. They lost money on it. It's like, we could have done this in one take. And he's just sort of, you have like this kind of like undertone of, I'm still miffed about that. And I think what was the second one? Yeah, there were a bunch of takes with Sean Connery that had to be redone in Wales, which was a problem because they only had Sean Connery for 1 week. And like the opening narrative, they'd forgotten to do it. Connery lived in Spain. Okay, he visited him there and they did the opening narrative in the bathroom. That's why it sounds so hollow. That's Sean Connery's Lou.
Yeah.
He did it on the toilet seat.
I heard that. And like, I never realized why there was that kind of echo effect on that opening monologue. And when I found out this week that it was because it was filmed in Sir Shug's bathroom, I was incredibly amused.
Yeah. I think we're lucky he didn't flush. Sean Connery's presence in the movie is essential. He's Obi-Wan Kenobi. So
essentially, yes.
Well, it's the basic classic hero story. So you can just color in the hero story plot points, right? And so we have Obi-Wan Kenobi taking the young Jedi under his wing and teaching him, improving his fighting skills and teaching him about life, and then dying. Because, you can't have a master around, because then there's no hero. Then he'll just be asking daddy to do this or that for him, right?
I absolutely, and it's done in that kind of classic 80s style. We have like just a big montage of them like sword fighting and generally and kind of posing with swords on mountains and
Yeah,
chatting about immortality
great stuff.
and yeah,
Yeah.
it's all fun stuff. It's all fun, and again talking about scenes that kind of shouldn't work but kind of do for some
Hmm.
reason, like the running with the stag scene should be very very silly and is very very silly, but again it's like a kind of fist pumping moment
It
and
has a
not like a
charm.
kind of, it does have a charm, it
It
does have a
feels like
charm.
Rocky and Apollo running on the beach.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and
Fortunately, they don't hug the
it's
deer.
yeah, it's really nice to know that Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery became friends, and it almost like became quite close friends on the set of the movie, and it
Yeah.
almost makes that scene more charming of just watching them kind of run across the beach and being like, and you're just like, it's just two pals running across the beach.
Yes, and Sean
Nice.
Connery not being able to keep up because there's
No,
this one
no.
scene where you see Christopher Lambert just zoom past him, and Connery is just waving him off like, oh well. And they kept that
Connery
in.
was about 60 years old at the time,
Yeah,
it's to be fair.
yeah. To be fair, was that before? I think they did that before. Like he just done Never Say Never Again, which was the non-broccoli Bond.
That's true. That
Yeah,
came out just like 3 years before, 1983. Never Say
right.
Never
And that
Again.
was
So
sort
yes,
of a Connery comeback in many ways because he came back as James Bond and they did the whole "Who's the real James Bond" with Roger Moore because Roger Moore, of course, had Octopussy coming out, and so there was like
yeah.
this rivalry, but really there wasn't much of a rivalry.
I guess he kind of had a career resurgency at this kind of time because, like you say, this
Yep.
became successful in video, and the year after this came out, he did the Untouchables. So it was like
That was
he
it,
had a kind
and
of bit
yeah,
of a
that was what I was going to
career
say.
comeback.
And in the Untouchables, he's just incredible. I mean, it's like probably one of my favorite supporting roles he's ever done.
He is amazing in that film,
What's the
despite
matter?
the fact.
Can't you talk with a gun on your mouth?
So, and his Irish accent is terrible, but he's
Yep.
still amazing in that movie,
So is mine.
despite the awful accent.
So is mine. Well, Irish is hard. Can you do an Irish
It's a difficult
accent?
accent. No, I can't really do an Irish accent.
Yeah, you
Despite my
can.
surname, no, I can't.
You can, but you won't.
Despite my surname, no, I won't.
Yeah, because that's what
I don't want
like,
to
Murphy.
shame my ancestors.
I was like,
Yes,
Murphy.
my surname
Scottish.
is Irish. No, it's Irish. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Which brings us to the ancestry of one Conor McLeod. I looked into this because I'm a looker inter. And okay, that's complete fabrication. There was a battle with the Frasers, but hold on to your hat. That was with the MacDonald clan.
Of course it was. Yeah,
of course it was. And the Frasers beat their pants off. They routed them. So we have like this awful food distribution system called McDonald's in the world, and we have that because the Frasers were at war with the McDonald's. So here we have Highlander, and I suppose they couldn't use the name McDonald, or I don't know, maybe the writer just felt, well, no, this is a little on the nose using McDonald. I'll use McLeod. McLeod sounds great. It was a good TV show in the 60s, right? So we have the McLeods and the McLeods. So that means in the movie, you see them back in their castle skulking. They lost. They don't put a fine point on it, but they lost.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they were so pissed and drove off. He's basically the heir to the castle, right? Yep. That's sort of the feeling you get. Like he's like important. Connor is important. He's the heir. And so he dies on the battlefield and boom, he's alive again. Well, that can go in two ways. Your heir is still alive. Isn't that great? And he can't die. Isn't that even better? Because all you have to do is train him to be a great swordsman and he can't die on the battlefield. You have the perfect weapon. Or no, let's all just banish him because we're afraid God is punishing us.
That is true. Which, I mean, like,
medieval logic.
yeah, to be fair, the Church of Scotland was very strong at the time, and that entirely reads correctly of that response. So
Okay, that said, why were the crosses burning? Is that a Scottish thing?
no,
Okay, you just think that was cool. Because there's like two scenes where you see burning crosses, and it's like, why is there a burning cross there?
Yeah, I really do think the latter. I think it's there's a lot of things in this movie that are kind of like in it because it's cool imagery.
Yeah.
So yeah,
like the lighting in the bar.
I think it's definitely the latter.
Did you see there's this point in the movie where he comes up to Brenda after stalking her in the underground garage of Madison Square Garden, where he comes to retrieve his sword after killing Facile, and so he stalks her to this bar, and she orders a whiskey, and he's already in it, and he starts talking to her, and there's like this cross light from outside, and that's daylight. It's so weird.
Yes,
that's not a street light. That's like bright light. It's so weird.
Yeah. So,
but like, not if you're used to Malkeo music videos.
Exactly. That's the exact point. Like it's kind of what. Yeah, the whole lighting scheme of the whole movie's like that. Yeah. Like I know this is skipping way ahead, but the scene where the Kurgan yeah, I know. The scene where the Kurgan kidnaps Brenda, when he bursts into her apartment, there's like a door open that has like it just like bright neon red light coming out of nowhere. Yep. Like it just yep. like kind of like, yeah, what's that light doing there? Seems normal. What is that light? Like, and there's lots of lighting things like that where you're like, where is that light coming from? That can't possibly be a true lighting source. Yeah. So,
yes, and
but like you say, it's kind of music video logic.
The filming style, and this film is just out there. It just he does stuff that just makes no sense, and he does stuff that is just. I don't think accidentally, because I think they planned most of this stuff out, like music videos. The transitions, like the moment where Connor is in his study and he looks at his fish tank, and then the camera pans up and you're in Scotland on a lake. I mean, why didn't that win an award? It is just amazing. And the whole movie is full of stuff like that, where you see Connor tied to his, what's that thing called? He's like this where you pull an ox cart with.
I can't remember the name for it.
Neither can I, because I've never done that. But he's basically tied to this piece of wood, and he's walking past a matte painting, and that just sort of segs into like this wolf picture that, according to Russell Mulcahy, he just saw on a street somewhere and filmed, and that goes into the image of the poster of Les Miserables. Because that basically explains, well, he's suffering, he's miserable, life sucks for him. So it's like this transition that kind of, in a matter of 3 seconds, just tells an entire mood and explains the story of what's happening now. And because they skip time, because the next time we see Connor, he's got his act together. He's a smith, and he has a nice, decent tower. And he's apparently making money, and he has a pretty girl, and they're happy. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up. So it's those sequences, they just allow for a lot of natural time skipping that enhances the viewing experience. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, the transitions are great. I love the transitions. I love the two transitions you mentioned. I love the first transition from the car park, where we go through the kind of roof of the car park, and then we come up in Scotland, and the music switches, and it's just a really great stuff.
Yes,
and the whole movie's kind of like that.
And they don't have to explain everything, because they show you. And that's the brilliance, I think, of his style. It's like, it's the most perfect distillation. I should say distillation. See what I was talking about with like saying words that are just gibberish instead of English. Um, the perfect distillation of show don't tell. He's showing you. He's not hitting you on the nose with plot points or have someone explain some. He doesn't need to. He can just show you. He doesn't, because in his music videos, he's speaking with images to explain the music. So it just melds into this perfect storytelling way of making a movie. I thought it was amazing. And I'm shocked that this guy just didn't get better scripts to film.
I know what you mean. He does have an incredible visual style, and he could have really done something with that style if matched with the correct script and the right kind of studio backing. But yeah, he got the sequel. He got things like The Shadow, and it's not. Yeah, he didn't get a lot of breaks after this in terms of
that's the 90s,
really
man.
good scripts.
90s Hollywood was just full of grudges. I think it had to do with the coke. People not paying each other for coke deals, and people being pissed at each other for stuff that happened at parties. And it's, no, I don't want to work with you anymore. You did this, that, the other to me. And I was like, yeah, but dude, I was so high. Can't we get over this? Yeah, no, maybe not. That's the 90s. Everybody was
I guess so.
getting their comeuppance.
I guess so. I guess that like studios didn't seem to have like kind of their finger on what they just weren't sure what people were into. And like, 90s movies is all about the indies. It's all about, your Coens and your Linklaters and your Tarantinos and your Kevin Smiths and all the kind, and then
Schweinstein's favorites, I call them.
Yeah, unfortunate, but yes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people love the 90s. You love the 90s. You make a podcast about it. So really, you do have to like really look at the Schweinstein element to it, because he put a big fingerprint on it. And in retrospect, it was a nasty one.
Yeah, no, it's a horrid legacy that he's left. But yeah, no, it's true. You can't avoid it. The 90s is, the Weinsteins have their finger all over the 90s, particularly with not with like the Linklater and the Coens never worked with them, but obviously particularly Kevin Smith and Tarantino.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Like a lot of those people. And yeah, the James Mangold and lots of different kind of directors. And yeah, it's pretty horrible. Yeah. Anyway, Highlander. Cheerier times.
Oh, it's if you're a good podcast, you can just go on a tangent, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay, so did the crime procedural, did the kind of detective story, did it enhance the movie or did it bother you?
It doesn't enhance the movie. It's
just there.
It is. It's just there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't bother me to the extent of like, I don't think it necessarily makes the movie worse. It's just confusing as to why it's there, particularly because the investigation ends up going nowhere. We don't see, like, for example, we could have had like after everything, even though Connor did commit the murder that they're searching him for, they could have seen like Connor defeat the Kurgan or something and be like, and see that he's a good guy, or they could have found out about the Immortals, or there could have been all sorts of different avenues for the investigation to make sense and be woven.
But they just bumble around and don't get it.
But they just and then they just drop out the movie.
Yeah,
there's the Kurgan has a fight with another Immortal, and they, an ex-Marine tries to shoot the Kurgan up, and then they have a conversation with that ex-Marine, and then they walk out the film.
Yeah, because
it's completely pointless.
They just think he's nuts, and it's like, well, we're never going to get this indicted. And I guess they should have just shot a scene where they just throw the file into a drawer and not do anything with it. It just goes cold. It's a cold case now. It's like, oh, fuck this. I am not talking to the DA about some asshole in a hospital who says stuff about the quickening and how he cut someone else's head off and became more powerful, and how he was filled with and riddled with bullets and it didn't hurt him. I am not talking to a DA about that. I am just going to ignore this whole thing until it just goes away. They should have just shot that scene or an alternate. And that's what I was thinking about last night when I saw the movie again. I was thinking Monty Python and the Holy Grail. What if halfway through the fight, right, the lights turn on and the cops come and they just arrest Kurgan and Connor and Brenda, of course, because she's an accomplice now. So they just arrest the three. It's like, okay, enough of this. No, you've done enough head chopping for today. Yeah, let's go home. Okay,
that's
everybody, let's go home. Just like in Monty Python, where you have like this big epic ending, and it's like these two armies, and they're about to assault the castle, and then the policeman just shows up and arrests King Arthur.
I think, yeah, not in the mainstream sense.
Yeah,
I think
that's what Hollywood. That's how Hollywood thinks.
Yeah.
That's
how Hollywood thinks. Yeah. Because like Monty Python is one of those things where it was shown on BBC America, and like it's like a kind of alternative college campus thing. But like, in the mainstream sense, I don't think like a mainstream American audience really gets.
People in Kansas don't watch that stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
And Hollywood thinks in terms of, okay, how are we going to sell tickets in Kentucky? That's how they think.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately because they look down on people outside of Hollywood, I think. That's why a lot of those movies are just so on the nose and so ham-fisted. That's a nice word you use in your podcast. I'm stealing that. Ham-fisting. It's great.
Ham-fisted. Okay,
yes,
cool.
Yes, this non-English speaker really likes that word. And I think that's one of the reasons they think their audience is stupid. That's one of the gripes my co-host Doug Greenberg always has. Is like, it's like you get this movie and they basically hand you the plot like you're a 3-year-old, like you're stupid, because that's how they think about you. This is what is our ideal customer? Well, he's a moron. He thinks like a 3-year-old, and he will just buy our stuff without thinking about it.
I think there's a lot of studios that have worked like that and have made movies like that are very handholdy and very kind of just like everything's delivered to you on a plate, and everything's kind of heavily signposted just in case that you weren't paying attention, or you were looking at your phone or something. That's when some movies kind of fall apart, is instead of trusting the vision of a director or a writer, or the crew, the actors, they've like trusted the opinions of various different audiences and been like, well, they like this, they didn't like that, take this out, blah blah blah, and then it becomes like, it just becomes like this McDonald's product, and and generally you can tell when movies are like that, and generally you can tell where movies had like more input by a creative person. You're like,
they turn cookie cutter.
Yeah,
and one of the things I think is why Highlander is standing the test of time, and only Highlander, not any of its sequels that try to cookie cut it, because it's just original. It's a truly original movie, and partially by accident, I guess, because we're kind of trying to pull the threads out and see what makes it tick here. And I think partially it's because it's by accident, because they hired a crazy director who was doing music videos. So they were thinking, well, he does them on the cheap. So, our budget, will fit because he will just make it happen with rope and string.
Yeah.
But
I think it's partly the absurdity of the casting as well.
Oh yeah.
Like I think that really adds to like the charm and appeal of it, because as we've kind of talked about, we've got a Frenchman playing a Scotsman, we've got a Scotsman playing a Spanish Egyptian, and we've got an American playing a Russian. So it's all kind of everything.
It's all over the place. How did they get away with it?
All over the map.
How did they get away with it? It's just you don't care.
I have no idea.
You don't care because this movie is so fun and it's so good, and the story is so strong. And the emotions are so well done, and you don't care because it's just riveting. It's just riveting. It is. You just want to see how it ends. You just want to see Connor win and become happy, not the depressed, cranky dude he's before, right? Because we haven't talked about this, but of course, he's chronically depressed from losing the great love of his life, and he's depressed for centuries. And you get all these flashbacks. And where you can tell he just doesn't care. I mean, there's one scene where he's in a duel and he's just drunk and he just gets stabbed 20, 30 times. He doesn't care. That's a man who doesn't care. That's a man who's like, okay, enough. okay, so I apologize for calling your wife a bloated warthog or whatever he said. And it's like, I bid you good day. And the dude is like tired from stabbing him 30 times. And it's like, eh, okay. And then there's a joke written in because his second shows up with guns, with muskets, and like, sir, you could shoot him. And he wrestles the gun away from him and just shoots his own assistant. I mean, it makes light of a situation that is actually very tragic, because this is a couple of centuries in and he's still bereaved. He's still like, well, why am I even going on? And then you have like the World War II scene where he finds this girl hiding somewhere in a factory and he's shot. And the girl is like, hey, you're still alive. How did that happen? So he's revealing himself, right? Because he doesn't really care anymore. So he's revealing himself and he's like, hey, it's a kind of magic. Shh. Here we have a hit song. And so he gets up, he shoots the Nazi, and he takes the girl home and adopts her. That's like adopting a puppy because you feel bad, right? Because it's immortal. So it's a puppy to him. It's like when we have pets, we know that pet is ultimately, it might die on you and you will be sad, but at least you're happy now. You have a little puppy to caress.
Yeah, I remember like rewatching it just the other day there, and it's been a few years since I watched it because like I watched it just like 2 days ago, right. And the previous time I watched it was when I saw it at the Edinburgh Film Festival for its 30th anniversary. So that's about, I'm trying to work that out. It's about 6 years ago now. So
okay, so Highlander is big in Scotland, eh?
Yeah. Pretty cool. Surprising.
Really?
But yeah. Like yeah. But like it was a great screening. Clancy Brown came to the screening, did a Q&A.
Wow.
He was in full Scottish regalia. He was wearing the kilt and he was wearing, he had the ski and do and he had all the
was he a sir? On. Did he like buy one of those certificates?
No. No, anybody can wear a kilt. Yeah, I mean, like, I think he might have some Scottish heritage, but I mean, I guess anybody could wear a kilt if, like, because you can get ones
Scottish
that
anyway. It was introduced by some English guy, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's... so, yeah, no, like, you don't have to have, like, the tartan of your family, as what I was meaning. But, yeah.
What I learned was... when I was reading up on Braveheart, was tartans were like a 17th century thing. And of course, Braveheart is 13th century. So they were wearing something else. Or they were wearing nothing at all going into battle. That was the Scottish way.
I mean, yeah, like, I guess you don't go to Braveheart for historical accuracy. Because it's one of those things that you read into and you're like, hey, hang on, that French princess he was romancing would have been about 10 at the time. That's weird. All sorts of things like that in the film.
Yes. So if you want to hear Braveheart being buried because of its historical inaccuracy, I recommend my episode on it on the Mel Gibson channel. I do it with Doug, and we do a number on it. But it's interesting. It's like movies about Scotland that aren't Scottish at all, like Highlander, you would not think of them as being popular in Scotland, but for some reason they are. And I think Christopher Lambert is actually quite popular in Scotland and a welcome guest. So there you go.
Absolutely, he is. He absolutely is. Billy Connolly has a joke that the Scottish are the only nation who buy their own tourist tat. They're the only people in the world who, go up to Loch Ness and, buy the little Nessie and all the little key fobs and all the little tourist bits and and really get into the whole tartan shortbread image of Scotland. So we buy into our own tourist rubbish. He does like a really funny routine on it. I love Billy Connolly.
I love Billy Connolly. He's awesome. He's one of my favorite comedians. So Clancy Brown, huh? Did Clancy Brown steal the movie?
Did Clancy Brown steal the movie? Yes.
The Kurgan steals the movie for me.
Yes.
I love the Kurgan.
The Kurgan does steal the movie. I think that everybody's kind of good. Well, when I say that, I mainly mean Lambert and Connery and Clancy Brown are all good. But Clancy Brown definitely steals the movie. And I think the point where he completely steals the movie, even though like throughout the movie he has been entertaining, when he's first introduced and he's brooding and he's wearing his big dragon helmet and all that. The moment where it's like, oh yes, you have completely stolen the movie is the church scene.
Oh yes,
where where he's bothering that priest and he's singing and dancing around, and it's just like he's just having so much fun, and you're like, oh,
he's
man.
a true immortal. He embraced immortality. I can't die, so I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. It's great. He's in a church. He's licking priests. I mean, he's spouting platitudes about, I have something to say. He's in a church. Shut the hell up. Better to burn out than to fade away. When you're an immortal, you start thinking in terms of like that. It makes perfect sense. He's to me, he's the best part of Highlander in terms of selling immortality and making it seem more fun, because Connor is just so depressed throughout his immortality. I mean, in the end, he finally finds a girl again. He's sort of happy. You can tell. He's like, oh, I know she's a fraud because, she's just after me because of the swords and proving the katana is older than it actually is. She wants to know why. He's just being used, really. But he's sort of happy again. And
that's true.
And his daughter/secretary actually says this to him. It's like, hey, just embrace this. I mean, this is the first time I've seen you happy, and I don't know how long, maybe ever.
Again, it's like the kind of wacky thought processes of this film. It was just like when, I don't know if it was a Gregory Wynn invention or if it was, the other script writers, Bell Wood and Larry Ferguson.
Yeah,
but like at some point they were like, oh, we're going to have this character who's a love interest. She's called Brenda. Yeah. She's a forensic expert and also, for no apparent reason, a sword historian.
Yeah. How's that work?
What? Like, just in her spare time, she's like a sword expert, writes books about swords?
Yes, and she's a forensic expert who works for the police, has an office in the police department, but is a part of the Smithsonian. How?
Also, because she doesn't sleep because she's maybe a vampire?
Yeah, I suspect the TV show Bones is based on her. Remember that? The Bones?
I remember,
it's thing. It's like this group of professors and specialists in the museum who are hired by the police as consultants. Yeah, really. Yeah, that's realistic. They wouldn't call the FBI or anything. Yeah, why would oh, please, Yeah, and I think somebody just saw Highlander too many times, was smoking something and thought, Bones. Yeah, that's what Captain Kirk would name Scotty, Bones. And we'll call her Bones because she studies bones. Yes. Who studies bones? Oh, people in the Smithsonian. Oh, wait, Highlander. Yeah, that'll work. We'll take a female protagonist and we'll make her a forensic specialist and she'll work with the police. And I mean, right? Brenda is Bones.
Could very well be.
Could very well be.
I mean, I can see the logic of it. I can see the thread that you pulled there.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, one of the thing about this podcast is the simplicity of Hollywood baffles you. It really does baffle you. It's like, no, they didn't arrive here because... Yes, they did. There was a meeting on this, and that's what they said. Shocking. But we have Highlander, and we have this awesome sword fight, right? This whole Silver Cup thing, and it was pretty cool. With the letters falling and everything's electrified and they fall through a roof and stuff that would kill a normal human being, but of course they're immortal.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
I think like the thing is, like, I guess we haven't really talked a lot about, we've talked a lot about the plot. We've not really talked a lot about the action, but like the finale, on the roof with the Silver Cup sign, and the fight between Ramirez and the Kurgan are both just incredibly fun.
They are.
They're just and it's just very well shot action sequences as well.
Yeah, and it's the Connery fight is fun because it's Connery, right?
Yes.
He slices his neck through. So the Kurgan starts to talk differently because he's holding his neck, and Connery just gives James Bond quips like, "Oh, my cut has improved your voice." It's good. The movie is just worth it for that.
Yeah. And also, like, it's just great fun because it's like, I mean, I guess that the finale is a slightly quote unquote more serious fight scene, but the Ramirez Kurgan fight scene is also just has this hilarious absurdist quality to it as well, because you have these like 1960s Star Trek style styrofoam bricks just falling all over the place. I mean,
and you can tell.
Oh yeah, no, like they're just painted styrofoam.
They don't care.
That's just hilarious.
We don't have the money, guys. We just don't have the money.
We run out of budget. It's fucking, just paint the styrofoam. We'll do.
We need this scene. We'll shoot it at night. We'll make it like it's you know what? We'll make a thunderstorm. Yeah, that'll hide things so we can mess around with the lighting. And no, it doesn't work. It's really 80s filming. There you go. Sure it's a music video. But that's why Connery is so important. But yeah, so the end fight. Okay, so I am really into sword fighting, truth be told. Okay, so I studied it a little bit. I have swords in my house, and so that fight really bothers me for many reasons. Mostly because you don't fight with a katana that way. You just don't. It doesn't work that way. I mean, if that sword is that old and folded so many times, it actually means it's brittle, because folding metal is basically pushing oxygen out of it, so it becomes stronger, right? So and Japan was known for having very weak iron deposits, so they would fold their iron and process it a long time and many times to make it as strong as they possibly could. And the swords, the katanas, look that way and are so thin because they had so little iron, right? They had so little raw material to work with. So it was all meticulous, and it was all expensive and crafted by expert craftsmen, because if you have very few raw materials, that's what happens. Okay, so here comes the European claymore that the Kurgan uses. Okay, so this claymore is in a suitcase, and it's in 4 parts actually. And if you actually use the sword like that, clicked together, it would break on impact. It would just break. There's no cohesion to that sword. It doesn't work. No, I'm sorry. All my nerd bells are ringing here. It's like, no, this can't happen. This does not compute. So if I ignore that, then there are the sword styles, right? And they do a better job with that. But a katana is a first strike weapon. It's extremely light. It's thin. It's fast, and it's as sharp as a razor. So basically, you draw and you try to slice someone's head off. That's what it's for, because it's kind of like a last-ditch weapon. Because the Japanese in battle, they would use pole arms and other stuff. So the katana was a weapon of last resort, whereas the claymore that the Kurgan is using is basically a hammering weapon. It's long, so you can stick people on horses with it, and you can get the people in harness who have hammers and stuff like that. So the choreography doesn't make much sense. You don't have a duelist kind of fight happening, because the claymore is much heavier and isn't as fast as the katana would be. So the guy with the katana would be able to close range much easier. He could like stick him everywhere because it's light and fast. So he could hit his ankles, and he could hit his knees, and he could hit his elbows long before that claymore is like raised up again. It makes no sense, but it's a cool fight. They hit swords, and there's like an electric current running through the swords, and it looks really cool, but it's a ridiculous fight.
It is a ridiculous fight. But again, it is that kind of like that thing of, reality versus movie. It's like that kind of it's reality fantasy thing that, it's fantasy. It's like that kind of thing where gun nerds always talk about, like, if Clint Eastwood really shot that weapon like in Dirty Harry, he'd break his wrist, all that kind of stuff. Like it's like, yeah, I know, but I don't care. Because like it's cool, it's a cool image, and this is kind of the same thing. It's like, yes, you're right. All the logistical points you make are correct, but You know, it's just like
Star Trek fans. People, it's a ray gun. It does what it's supposed to do. Don't worry about the science of it, right? Nobody cares it's called a phaser. To us, it's a ray gun, that kind of thing. Although I do care, though. For the record, I care. Okay, so
there's nerdy things like that I care about too. But like at the same time, it's like you have that balance of like it's a movie, but also there's maybe sometimes that nerdy part of you like, oh, I don't know, you know, because sometimes like I know a bit about martial arts, and you know sometimes when I watch martial arts movies, I'm like, no, really, no.
Why?
But you know, you know, it's kind of like being like an MMA fan, and like there's that kind of part of time in the kind of late 2000s, early 2010s, where MMA was like super popular, and you'd be like, would you really be using that in a
Brock
fight?
Lesnar years.
Yeah. It's like, oh, doesn't seem very effective to use a takedown right now. Triangle chokehold? No, it doesn't seem very likely in a street fight.
But, you know, like Kurgan gets his head chopped off. I guess Connor wins the prize. Part of the prize, I guess, is Brenda. He starts to explain the prize in an epilogue. They're back in Scotland because he goes home. Okay. He knows everything about everyone, and he can hear people's thoughts and dreams, and he can help people understand each other. And so he becomes a telephone switchboard, I guess. A diplomat
of sorts, like yes, like a kind of cosmic diplomat.
A cosmic diplomat.
Yes.
Yeah, so the immortal training he received to get this prize, which was chopping other people's heads off, prepared him for this role.
Well, you know, he's got a nice he's got a softer hairstyle. He's got a kind of cozy Aran jumper. He's obviously a man of peace now. He's dressed like a man of peace. You know, he's very much the wardrobe of a man of peace now. So he's very reformed. He doesn't have that kind of old shabby trench coat that he's been wearing throughout the movie to denote that he's kind of broody and depressed, you know, and he doesn't have like that slicked back, kind of very slicked back down hairstyle. You know, he's got a kind of fluffy hairstyle. So, like, yes,
he's let his hair down.
Yeah, exactly. He's literally let his hair down, and I think all of these things denote that, in fact, that decapitating people throughout the centuries eventually makes you a man of peace. I don't quite know the logic of it, but like,
let's not think about it too much. They made him Jesus.
Basically.
Yes. It's the Jesus story. Now, they go from the hero story to the Jesus story, which sort of makes sense because in the original story, Jesus, of course, rises from the dead and becomes immortal. So this is the opposite. He wins the prize, and the prize for an immortal is becoming mortal. So they can have babies now.
Yes, this is the life cycle of an immortal, or the mortal. One remaining mortal. So you're born mortal, then you die, you become immortal. Then through centuries, you cut people's heads off for many hundreds of years, and then you win the prize and you become mortal again. It's a very interesting life cycle of the immortal.
It's very karmic.
Yes. Everything comes back to the start.
Yes, so that's Highlander. And it's a really cool movie, and it looks great, and it's fascinating, and you can just rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it, and it never becomes boring, and the jokes always work. So don't listen to this podcast, just watch the movie instead. That's basically my message, because I love this movie, and I will continue to love this movie no matter what.
I'm very much the same. It's a great looking movie. It is some people will react against it because some people don't like that music video looking style and think that it's cheesy. That's fine. Yeah. I personally enjoy that kind of style. The plot is kind of nonsense. Lots of things are unexplained, but in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because the characters work. The story pretty much works. The emotional beats of the story work. The comedic beats of the story work. The action scenes work. Yeah, it all looks pretty cool with all those drenched in neon lights. So, yeah, watch the movie.
Definitely. Okay, Scott, great to finally meet you. I really enjoyed podcasting with you, so I hope to do many, many, many more.
Okay.
If you're into
absolutely.
that. And
I'll come back on.
you're a very welcome addition to our network because I love listening to your show. It's really good. I also secretly started listening to all your horror shows because I'm kind of a horror geek.
Excellent. And if people want to check that out, you can check me out on the network, all night days action all the time.
Yes,
and
where
you can
we
check
find
out
your horror stuff?
My horror podcast, you can find on my own personal website, newhorrorexpress.com. And also you can just find it wherever you get podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, all those places. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for participating. I love doing these specials, and it's a great way to meet other hosts and collaborate and bring both our shows together and mash it up and see what comes out. So I think we have a good one here.